Welcome back to National Report. You know, it's no surprise that Bernie Sanders is a popular candidate among the youth vote. But after Joe Biden's big Super Tuesday victory last week, can students get excited about supporting him? Campus Reform went to American University to find out. Take a look.
Do you feel like you could get excited about supporting Joe Biden, or do you feel like if you potentially supported him, it would be because that's who the Democratic Party is choosing for you?
If I were to choose Joe Biden, it would just be because everybody else is supportive of him.
If he becomes like the candidate for the Democratic Party, I would vote for him anyway, but he's not the person I'm most excited for.
Anybody over Trump at this point, but I cannot say that I can get excited about another old white man.
All right, joining us now is Eduardo Neret. He's the reporter who you saw in that video. He's with Campus Reform. Eduardo, thanks for being with us again. Always great to see your videos and what you're working on. Let's talk about this one specifically. Why did students say no, they don't want to support Joe Biden?
Yeah, after Super Tuesday, now that Biden seems to have momentum in the race, I wanted to see if student views on him were changing. But as you saw in the video, they're not very excited about supporting him. They're not enthusiastic. And they talked to me about things, the fact that he's a career politician, the fact that he's a member of the establishment. And I think that's a bad sign for the Democratic Party. It's hard enough to get young students out to vote, to get, Gen Zers and millennials out to vote. And they're certainly not going to do that if they're not excited about the candidate. I also want to point out really quickly that this is a trend we've been seeing for a while at the Leadership Institute's Campus Reform. So I've done several videos over the past few months on different campuses about Joe Biden. I did one at the University of Miami talking to students about Biden's Ukraine ties, and a lot of students told me that was corrupt. More recently, I did one in New Hampshire where students seemed to be excited and wanting to talk about every other candidate in the Dem field at the time, but they didn't want to talk about Joe Biden. So, Biden has not had a good track record in terms of enthusiasm with students, and that has not changed despite his Super Tuesday victory.
Eduardo, when you talked to some of the students on campus, you talked about Joe Biden. Were any of the students able to give you any points as to why they would vote for Biden, or perhaps policies that Biden stands behind, that they're behind? Did they know anything about Biden and what he's done in office?
No, so that was another interesting aspect of the video. I said, if there was one reason that you could support Biden, what accomplishment would you name? And a lot of the students just said, well, we know he was vice president with President Obama, so I guess that's good enough. And that's another negative, that Joe Biden has as well. President Trump is going to be presenting a track record of success if he goes up against Biden. And clearly, a lot of these younger voters don't have anything to point to when it comes to Joe Biden. Another interesting thing, I think, that, why students are not supporting Biden and instead are supporting Bernie Sanders is because the environment they have on campus. And so we often talk about how socialism is on the rise on college campuses. And I want to give your viewers a couple examples of that. So recently at Holy Cross, we reported on an economics professor who talked about the need to reform capitalism in the classroom. At the University of Texas, San Antonio, there was a socialist group on campus who had a breadline event, and they were talking about how breadlines were a good thing. And so when this is going on in the environment of a college campus, when you think about whose views this most aligns with, that's the view of Bernie Sanders. These are Bernie Sanders policies that are being discussed on college campuses. And so when students are on campus, in the classroom every day, talking to other students, and when they hear these ideas, they're going to think, well, the candidate who represents this the most is Bernie Sanders. I think I like Bernie. That candidate isn't Joe Biden.
Yeah, but at the same time, again, back to your video, the students I watched, they said they would still support Joe Biden if he were the nominee. Why did they say that they would support him even if they disagreed with him?
They talked about the fact, a lot of them said, at the end of the day, what's important to them is beating Donald Trump. They said, at the end of the day, if Biden is the candidate, I guess I could support him. But again, I think to my earlier point, that's a bad sign for the Democratic Party, because people may say that, but it takes a lot more than a reluctant vote for people to show up to the polls. So again, the Democratic Party is going to have to consider who they want here. And I think these students are representative of the greater party. The party is moving left. The party seems to have more identity with what the students say. And so if Biden's a candidate who isn't resonating with the far left of the party, young or otherwise, what does that say? Are these people going to come out to vote? Are they going to show up at the polls in November if Joe Biden is the nominee?
Let me ask you this, because I wonder this myself. There's a lot of young support for Bernie Sanders, right? But then there's a lot for those under the age of 30 that didn't come out on previous Super Tuesday to vote, which is interesting. I'm wondering if that's going to be the same case today. My question for you is this: How about celebrity endorsements? Does that influence a young voter's decision? If you see someone that you follow in a movie that you really like, or on Instagram, and they say, hey, I'm going out for Bernie Sanders, you should too, does that play a part?
You know, history tells us that it's not very strong. Hillary Clinton in 2016 had endorsements from people like LeBron James to all of these Hollywood celebrities, you name it, and she still lost. However, I do think we could see something different with Bernie Sanders, again, because he already owns that youth enthusiasm. You know, young students are very excited about Bernie Sanders. You see a lot of young people at his rallies. So if he's able to connect with them even more so by, you know, bringing out, you know, some of the rappers, some of the Hollywood movie stars, athletes coming out and supporting him, I think that's even going to help him further. It's going to even drive the case and kind of create a wave of youth wanting to support him because the people that they like are supporting him. So I think it's going to be very different with Bernie Sanders. It's going to be interesting to see if it actually has an effect at the polls, whereas Hillary Clinton's did not in that same way.
All right, Eduardo, we got about 30 seconds left with you. What video are you working on next?
Well, there's been a lot of panic right now, maybe rightfully so, about coronavirus. So we're going to campuses this week to talk to students, you know, what they think about coronavirus, how they would, you know, put it in comparison with some of the other things that they think are a threat right now, both globally and in the U.S. So we're going to talk to them about that, see what they know about the virus and see what they're saying about it. So it's going to be very interesting to see how, you know, student reaction, student knowledge on this play out in the future.
Absolutely. Fresh perspective. We always appreciate your time. Eduardo Neret, digital reporter for Campus Reform. Thanks, bud.